The following is an encore presentation from Austin Whitsitt at Flatoberfest 2022 in full high definition. Yay, Whitsitt. All right, you guys, we're going to get going with presentations now. And first up is our newest Globebuster, the master of debating. I gotta watch what they say. And his name is Austin Whitsitt. Whitsitt gets it. Give him a round of applause.
In a world. All right, how's it going? So we are gonna do a presentation on the Aether. Do not make it weird. So we'll be kind of information heavy and slightly technical at times, but I think it's super important. I guess we'll just start it with, if you've never heard of the Aether, it's an ancient idea. It's basically this all-encompassing energy field, we'll say, in layman terms, and it's all around you. And that may sound crazy, but it's because you've been indoctrinated. So let's start it off to break some of the cogdice here. And we'll look at some modern physicists admitting that there has to exist an ether. So we have, today the vacuum is recognized as a rich physical medium. A general theory of the vacuum is thus a theory of everything, a universal theory. It would be appropriate to call the vacuum ether once again. It's from the philosophy of a vacuum. Now, of course, we know nature abhors a vacuum. But you do have vacuum chambers, and you remove most of the air, and they have tons of electromagnetic energy that's not supposed to be there. They can't use the word ether in physics for obvious reasons. We'll cover that. So anyway, this is a famous physicist. Here's another quote we have from Paul Dirac, who's actually like the father of quantum field theory, effectively. We have now the velocity at all points of space-time playing a fundamental part in electrodynamics. It is natural to regard it as the velocity of some real physical thing. Thus, with the new theory of electrodynamics, we are rather forced to have an ether. This is from like the 50s. You haven't been told this, and that should, most people in this room probably have found out that we were lied to about where we live. I would imagine almost everyone here. Maybe there's some new people. Anytime you find out that you're not told about something and everyone knows about it that actually studies it, that should kind of raise your interest. All right, here's another quote. Investigations point towards a compelling idea that all nature is ultimately controlled by the activities of a single superforce. Thus, a living vacuum, the ether, holds the key to a full understanding of the forces of nature. And this is a very infamous author. If you guys have seen, maybe I covered geocentrism. It's on my YouTube channel. He's also in this. He's very, he's kind of a legend when he calls out heliocentrism. A couple more quotes here just to kind of break through how this is well known that there is an ether. Well known. All right, next quote. There are good reasons to think that the universe is a multi-layered, multicolored superconductor. That all four known forces can be brought together in a unified theory. That seemingly hopelessly different kinds of matter are just different aspects of one all-embracing stuff. I anticipate that the next few years will be a new golden age in fundamental physics. This is Frank Wilczek, and he won a Nobel Prize actually in physics. He's a professor from MIT. Now, this is 2008. He's definitely incorrect, right? Like, this won't be accepted. There won't be some golden age unless the people in this room are successful and we're able to make it happen. This is obviously very censored, but a couple more quotes and then we'll get into it. The word ether has extremely negative connotations in theoretical physics because of its past association with opposition to relativity. This is unfortunate because stripped of these connotations, it rather nicely captures the way most physicists actually think about the vacuum. Robert Laffin, Nobel Prize in Physics, is actually from Stanford. So, again, to clarify, nature abhors a vacuum. There's no such thing as a perfect vacuum, but we have vacuum chambers, and we can get like about 10 to the negative 6 of a vacuum chamber on the Earth, and that's very, very little air. There's way too much energy in that vacuum chamber. What that shows us is there's something outside what we perceive to be air, and this is this is a really big deal if you can wrap your mind around it. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of make it make sense to you by the end of the presentation. But he also said about the time relativity was becoming accepted, studies of radioactivity began showing that an empty vacuum of space had spectroscopic structure similar to that of ordinary quantum solids and fluids. Subsequent studies with large particle accelerators have now led us to understand that space is more like a piece of window glass than ideal Newtonian emptiness. Of course, emptiness does not exist, and that's stupid. It is filled with stuff that is normally transparent, but can be made visible by hitting it sufficiently hard to knock out a part. The modern concept of the vacuum of space, confirmed every day by experiment, is a relativistic ether, but we do not call it this because it's taboo. That's again Robert Laughlin, Nobel Prize. He's from Stanford. So people that actually study it know there's an ether. You can't call it an ether. It's like the bad word. It would be like saying, I love the devil in church or something. Like you can't say the word, but it's well known that it's there. So, in fact, actually, I don't know if you've ever seen this guy, this fuzzy-haired crackpot. His name is Einstein. He married his cousin, and then wanted to actually get with her daughter, and forgot to wear clothes and cross-dressed, and he did a bunch of crazy stuff. He was literally kind of crazy, but he's revered as some type of genius. He didn't come up with anything, of course, but even this fuzzy-haired crackpot knew there was an ether. He said, according to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable, for in such space there would not only be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. And this is his writings on ether and the theory of relativity when he gave a speech at the University of Leiden. So, you obviously aren't told this. Like I said, I know most people probably woke up to where we live, but they told us that the Earth's a magic spinning cartoon ball in a vacuum, and that there's this thing called gravity, and then relativity is what explains gravity, and that's the bending and warping of space and time. And this is, of course, the guy that proposed it. You will never be told there's an ether, that there's electromagnetic energy being sustained in a background all around you, all-encompassing, carrying emotions and thoughts and feelings and energy. And this would all of a sudden make things much more coherent and unified, and you would begin to take your power back. And they can't let you know that. But it's actually even simpler than that, why they can't tell you about it. It debunks the heliocentric model. We'll get to that in just a second. So this has been known about for a long time, even before this guy. If anyone watches any of my content, I'm not particularly confident in the reflection of history as we are told. I think it's been very garbled. But we'll just kind of rock with what we do know. Aristotle proposed the ether as the first element, or the fundamental foundation of all other elements, that all other elements were derived from. He correctly conceptualized the ether of a dynamic process of rotation or vortex. Like I said, some of this will try to get technical. I'll try to kind of convey it in layman terms, but Aristotle knew that there was a vortex within an electromagnetic background, and this was the primary element. So the air you breathe, the light that's incredibly bright right over there, everything that you see, it comes from a primary state. And again, we've been so indoctrinated, this sounds crazy or woo-woo or whatever. There's something that you don't see. Everything you do see came from that. It's just like the only scientifically viable option that exists. And it should be perplexing as to why you've never heard that. All right, now here is, don't even know how to really say his name, Descartes. He's a famous French philosopher, scientist, and mathematician, followed Aristotle in that he too considered the ether as the crucial component that tied all other elements together. However, being a devoted atomist, he postulated the ether was a dense medium of very small particles spreading through space, which is a very important part we're about to cover, the idea of atomism, which is effectively the death of all true knowledge. And then here is Isaac Newton. Hence, it is manifest that the planets are not carried around in corporeal vortices, for according to the Copernican hypothesis, the planets going around the sun revolve in ellipses, having the sun in their common focus, and by radii drawn to the sun describe areas proportional to the times. But now the parts of a vortex can never revolve with such a motion. So here is Newton, in layman terms, saying, since we have to believe the Earth is this tiny speck of dust and it spins around the sun, there cannot be an ether with a vortex. And so that's, of course, should be kind of eye-opening. The reason that people don't acknowledge that there's an ether with a vortex in it is because it debunks the heliocentric model, for no other reason. There is no other reason. In fact, you can't explain anything that we observe in physics without acknowledging it. So this is him just point blank saying, well, if I presuppose the Copernican principle, which is the idea that the Earth is insignificant and doesn't have a special location, because you're all you came from rocks, nothing special about you, then we can't have a vortex. And this is contradictory to even what Aristotle knew. And this brings us to one of the primary points here, which is atomism versus ether. So if I say, did you guys know atoms don't actually exist? You may think that sounds crazy. I'm the crackpot now, but there's no such thing as atoms. You've never seen an atom. No one's ever seen an atom. It doesn't exist. Atoms do not exist. If anyone thinks that they can tell me otherwise, I would love to sit down and debate you about it, because I would be amazed if you could offer some evidence. I looked into this. I was surprised myself. No one's ever seen an atom. You kind of like when you Google pictures of satellites in space, you see a bunch of cartoons. Same thing with atoms. You're just going to see a bunch of cartoons. It's because they're just a concept. The ether is basically, it has a spiritual undertone, right? Like there's this metaphysical, immaterial realm around you that is outside the material world. Now, anyone that can even apply basic logic knows that this Earth couldn't exist, even if it was a tiny speck of dust that defies physics, without there being something outside of it that put it here. Just logically speaking, there's no other way. But this is not what we were taught in school, and this is not what your indoctrination camps wanted you to believe or understand. So materialism, the idea that everything that is seen either is material or comes from material, has evolved into atomism. And they think that everything is comprised of tiny little bombarding balls everywhere. They're obsessed with balls, from the small scale to the big scale. It's pretty horrible. So here's the best picture I could give of an atom, and it's a cartoon. Kind of like all the pictures of the Earth being a ball. Just cartoons. I think that's a pretty good sign that they're aligned. All right, so this is one of the primary points of this is ether and atomism are two different philosophies from the beginning and ways to interpret the world. One is everything has to be material, composed of little bombarding particles, because everything has to be made up of something that's in the material world. Ether is everything comes from outside the material world. Everything is a different version of what's outside the material world. And it's crazy because even like up here saying it right now, I know it sounds crazy to some of you. And it just goes to show how indoctrinated we've been. So I'm hoping some of the technical specificity will help elucidate this. Okay, so this is Democritus. And as you can see, he looks like a super cool guy. And this is where you get atomism. I think it's a beautiful depiction of what atomism is, actually. It's ridiculous. All right, Democritus was a prominent figure in atomic theory. He theorized that all material is made up of atoms. He said that atoms were so small that they could not be reduced to anything else. He theorized that the universe is made up of the space with atoms, or the being, and the vacuum, the vacuum that is absence of atoms. He called this empty space the void. Now this is long before they claimed they went to space and all this nonsense, right? So you should apply pattern recognition, you're going to find out that they didn't go to space. None of this stuff is true. They have little creepy Greek philosophers like this guy who, this looks like he just ate somebody or something, right? Like he looks insane. This dude looks insane to me. And he basically told you the heliocentric model in modern physics thousands of years ago, long before they claimed to have in any way verified it. He pictured atoms as mostly homogeneous. He thought the reason things look different and feel different to us is because they are made up of a different configuration and combination of atoms. He theorized that because everything is made of these infinite atoms, nothing really dies. Everything just changes form. This idea is very similar to the popular concept of today that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. I don't agree with that either. I know that might sound crazy to some of you, but what is matter? Matter is a modality of the ether, and so no, technically you can't create it, but you could manifest it via manipulation. In fact, Nikola Tesla said that when the ether is thrown into prodigious, infinitesimal worlds of velocity, which just means really fast and really small worlds of velocity, it manifests as matter. And that dude just gave us everything that we use electrically in this room, so he may have known what he was talking about, and so I think technically you could manifest matter, but I digress. Okay, Democritus said, he then theorized that motion has always existed. He said that the universe began with atoms moving in all directions. Does that sound familiar? It just began with something moving in all directions. The atoms began to collide with similar atoms to form larger entities. Democritus did not believe the universe formed because of a purpose. Of course he didn't. Look at this guy. He only believed it happened because of necessity. He theorized that the void and the being were infinite and expanded in all directions. This is just what they claim the Big Bang is. This is thousands of years ago, though, so what a coincidence. He also believed that there had to be infinite other worlds that consisted of atoms. Very profound, Democritus. So this is where it all started. This is the idea that everything, that's what atom means, right? Indivisible. That's what it means, its etymology. So it's basically the concept of the smallest thing that you could break everything down to, the smallest entity. It couldn't be broken down anymore. And it went into this idea that, well, even the Greeks back then, we become so deluded as a society, people actually think it's somewhat viable to think that there's no creator. I can assure you that it's not. It's logically bankrupt. So back in the day, everyone knew there was a creator. They just explained it different ways. So he was one of the few people within the Greeks that was like, oh no, there's no creator. That character is very frequent nowadays, but he was kind of a psycho. Again, I don't want to reiterate, but it's like, this is like the best picture I could find of the guy. Obviously, he was not depicted as a very good-looking dude that was chilling. All right, so here we're going to move on past the idea of atomism, just so you knew how long ago that happened, and they just happened to predict the Big Bang and all this nonsense we're told thousands of years ago. He was a prophet. So this is an ancient Vedic representation of ether physics, is what I put. So if you look at, and we'll cover this a little bit more, but if you look at the turtle at the bottom, this represents time. Now, a lot of people maybe as fighters are like, oh, let me guess, the Earth's on a turtle. And they try to make fun of you. That's a depiction of time. That's what time meant. That's what a turtle represents, time. And actually, you can use the back of a turtle shell, and then you can, get the calendar. I don't know if you guys know about that, but. So anyway, that's what that represents as time, which is basically where everything derives from. You're going to see two different types of motion in here, right? And we're going to cover this more in depth. But you basically, centrifugal motion, right? You have the inside of a donut and the outside of the donut, the hyperboloid and the toroid. Two different types of motion moving together. As one moves, the other one moves the other way. They move together like two sides of the same coin. I'm going to try to really make this make sense by the end of the presentation. But anyway, this has got the central source on time, and then you have the two opposing motions. And this is from thousands of years ago. This is ether physics. And not just like, oh man, let's just make something up. This is like a very accurate representation of ether physics. No, I don't agree with everything that the Vedic texts say or anything, but my point is just that this is a very ancient concept and it's been known for a long time. All right, a few more quotes here. Or that's not a quote actually. You may know who James Clerk Maxwell is. He came up with some very famous equations. Maxwell's equations. Famously known for his four equations explaining the behavior of electric and magnetic fields. He properly understood light. Now this is my take, right? I'm giving my take in this presentation, of course. Fight me. So he probably understood light and magnetism were nothing more than a process. I think this is maybe a good time to kind of. So like when you look at the lights, it's not, that light isn't like some entity. It's just a process happening. If you look at it like, we'll get into this, like atoms and electrons and protons and photons, there aren't little balls, there aren't like little physical entities. It's just processes happening. We're just experiencing something happening. Basically, light is the illumination of the ether, but we'll get into that. So anyway, he did understand this. He knew that lighting and magnetism were nothing more than a process, specifically a process of induction. So if you were to induce energy into something, we can say in really crude layman terms, absorb. So he understood that induction is the perturbation of a medium, so disturbance. If I jump in a pool and I wave my arms around, I would be disturbing the pool, right? So that's what a perturbation is. Something you have to have a medium to perturb, right? So he understood that. But however, Maxwell assumed ether permeated space and that light must move through a medium. Now, a lot of people that push the ether today, even, they think they still hold this to be true for some reason. light does not travel through anywhere. This is now again, this is a bit more of a technical presentation, but he was correct about the fact that light and magnetism were processes of induction, or that the perturbation of the medium itself, the disturbance, the vibration, oscillation, whatever you want to call it, is what gives you the magnetism and the light. But he thought the light was traveling through space, quote unquote, or the ether. This isn't true. This is not what happened. Light doesn't travel. Now it sounds crazy, right? Like when the lights are off and it's dark and then I turn it on, the light travels, Austin. It doesn't travel. The light's already there. We'll get into that in a second, but this all stems back from what we just covered with atomism and materialism, and it's the idea that everything has to fit into these material confinements you give them, which means you have to be able to count it. Cartesian measures, like you have to be able to say, oh, there's this dimensionality of it, or blah, 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 blah. This is what has basically rendered all modern physics futile and basically made it stupid. And I would venture out to say that the people that are in the know of where we live certainly don't adhere to such insane philosophy. All right, so some of you guys probably have heard about this, but Michelson-Morley's experiment, often referred to as the most famous failed experiment ever, signified a major shift in physics as we know it. However, both Albert Michelson and Edward Morley both applied this same lethal assumption, an ether filling space in which all things travel through. Now, again, it's not even a popular take within people that know there's an ether, but I'm quite confident in this. Ether doesn't fill space. Space is not a thing. There is no such thing as space. It's a concept. There's not some magic thing called space that fills the whole world and then everything fills within that. It's not real. That doesn't make any sense. And all the evidence is contrary to that, and things don't travel through it. So, well, some things could be right. I could throw a baseball through it, but he's making the assumption that light and magnetism, etc., travel through it. So did Michelson-Morley. So I'll briefly cover what Michelson-Morley is in case some people don't know. See if I can play this here. So they shot light perpendicular to one another. And as you see here, they expected, well, let me kind of explain it. So they think that the Earth is spinning around the Earth is spinning around the sun, right? So if the Earth is spinning around the sun and there's an ether, if we shoot light with the motion of the Earth, and then we shoot light against the motion of the Earth, they should get back to the receiver at different times. One's going with the motion, one's going against it. The light going against the motion of the Earth would take longer to get to the receiving end of the perpendicular rays on the table, right? So this is the expected result here. As you can see, there's a separation. One gets there later. In reality, when they shot the light, they got it much closer to identical than is predicted by heliocentrism. Okay, now it wasn't perfect, but it was not anywhere close to the prediction. This was hands down the biggest shift in physics in modern history. Not even close. Most of you guys were never taught about this. You may have heard about it, since you've been a flat earther and researched, but how could the most famous experiment that changed all of physics been left out of curriculum? It's for obvious reasons. It has drastic philosophical implications. So this is the actual result, of course. It is in no way separated the way that it should be. So this is where the fuzzy-haired crackpot comes back in. He says, via special relativity, that the ruler, as you can see, the ruler physically shrank. Okay, so there was a difference, you just couldn't tell because the ruler physically shrank that measured the difference in the light. This is top-tier physics. To this day, people believe this is real. So the ruler shrank, you just couldn't tell. It looked like it stayed the same. This is called a Lorentz contraction, still used in every higher level academic section of physics you can imagine. Now, of course, I think when you have evidence that contradicts what you believe and you have a theory and it makes a prediction and then the evidence directly contradicts it, you're like, okay, well, looks like my theory's wrong, right? I need to trash my theory. It didn't work. It's just trash. That's not what they do with the globe Earth, though. That's not what they do with heliocentrism either. They desperately cling on to it, making up anything that they need to keep it alive. including saying that matter physically shrank, you just can't tell. It's like me saying this podium changed sizes, you just couldn't tell it changed sizes, but I promise it did. Well, let me go measure it and see if it changed sizes. No, it's going to measure the same, but trust me, it changed sizes. It's so stupid. At the same time, they say that the clock, that time, physically widens time, you know, the concept of time, that it physically widens and then it slowed down. So it slowed down as all the matter shrank, so it looked like it took the same time and it traveled the same distance, but it was different. This is special relativity. You know, you might have been told when you were growing up Einstein was some genius. He was actually a psychopath, and he was in no way anywhere close to a genius. So anyway, this is still to this day all that the heliocentric model has. This really ends the whole debate right here. We can go shoot lasers over water and physically measure the surface of the Earth. It isn't curving. That's cool. That's true. They don't even have like a logically viable theory to pretend the Earth is a ball that spins around the sun. Literally, it doesn't exist. It's impossible on its face philosophically and logically. We've kind of been brainwashed, and via materialism, logic is the most important thing that exists. So if something is logically bankrupt or not viable, it's wrong. You don't have to do anything else. It's over right there. So the truth is, heliocentrism is debunked with the Michelson-Morley experiment. They will tell you that it debunked the ether because they're basically religious zealots. So anyway, I don't want to diverge too much on that, but that started the cascading effect that we now see today. So here is Einstein when he decided to put clothes on, and he said, "Therefore, I thought in 1905 that in physics, one should not speak of the ether at all." This goes to show that it's like this religious weirdo thing. You can only talk about what you're allowed to talk about. This judgment was too radical, though, as we shall see with the next consideration about the general theory of relativity. It moreover remains, as before, allowed to assume a space-filling medium if one can refer to electromagnetic fields. Now, he's wrong again. There's no space-filling medium. There's no space to fill. Space is a version of, or an absence of, ether. But anyway, it's conceptual. So it moreover remains, as before, allowed to assume a space-filling medium if one can refer to electromagnetic fields, and thus also for sure matter as the conditions thereof. So this is him just point blank saying, like, oh, based on, actually, I was told I couldn't talk about the ether. Well, I can't even propose general theory of relativity without acknowledging there could be an ether. One can thus say that the ether is resurrected in the general theory of relativity, since the new theory, metric facts, can no longer be separated from true physical facts, and the concepts of space and ether have merged together. Ludwig, Castro, Einstein, the Ether 2000. So this is kind of what I was trying to say earlier. Most people don't actually ever talk about this, but quantum mechanics and the 21st century physics has shown us that space and ether are not different things. For one, you cannot acknowledge the ether. And it's basically just different properties within the ether. That's all they're looking at the whole time. There isn't something called space with stuff moving around in it. Space isn't real. There's no such thing. It's the idea, kind of like a shadow. Like the shadow from these incredibly bright lights over here. Like that's just a privation, right? It's the absence of light. That shadow's nothing in and of itself. It can't have physical properties. That's what space is. Now they couldn't, again, just to reiterate, they couldn't acknowledge the ether though because it proved that the Earth was stationary. Okay, this was a long time ago. If there was an ether, the Earth could not be moving. It's that simple. So then we've come full circle to the 21st century where then you're like, oh, there's an ether, we can't call it that because it's taboo. You can't call it that because it would debunk the globe Earth model. That's actually what it is. All right, so they have a philosophical devotion to heliocentrism and materialism, which has decimated any true understanding of the ether and the nature of reality. And I know, like I said, this is kind of technical and nerdy, I guess, or whatever, but it's like very important that we understand these concepts if we're going to really progress towards like a positive future. All right, so what is the ether, Austin? A lot of people were asking me that like it was a refutation. Ether is not a substance that permeates space. We've covered that. Space is not all-encompassing container that houses all phenomena. This is a major disconnect with the true understanding of ether physics. Again, ether is not a substance. Thus, it is not physical in the same way as the other elements like fire, water, earth, and air. Aristotle was right about some things I put. So, it's not physical in those ways, but it has physical properties. It's hard to wrap your mind around this maybe, but there is a medium that basically, there's this huge spectrum of ether, and we perceive a small spectrum of it, and that's what we call the material world. That's what we see, that's what we think exists. All right, it's all the same thing. I know it sounds real new agey or whatever you want. It's just what it is. This is like physics, though. This is not about being new age or woo-woo. So ether is non-Cartesian, nor can it be measured, which means no location, extension, and no duration. So therefore, according to the atomists and the materialists, it doesn't exist. If I can't count it, it doesn't exist, basically. Philosophical dedication to materialism renders this understanding futile. There in which lies the problem. Ether is an immaterial background medium of pure potential. It cannot be quantified or measured intrinsically. So that's what I define ether as. It is pure potential. So when you come up with an idea, when you have revelation, intuitive understanding, this all actually comes from somewhere, and it comes from a place of pure potential, energy. Now, energy is not properly defined in modern academia as it's the ability to do work, and that's like I'm saying. So what is a human? Can you tell me what a human is? They have the ability to breathe oxygen. Yeah, okay. But what are they, bro? Oh, they have the ability to breathe oxygen. It's not answering the question, right? They can't define energy because they can't understand the ether. They don't understand ether physics. It's actually pressure mediation. It's the manifestation of the pure potential background. So anyway, ether is the necessary antecedent to energy, which is simply the polarization of ether, or pressure mediation. So I think that's a big part to understand. You can't have what we call energy without the pure potential state. That's what it is. There's this alternative realm of pure potential. It's like pure rest, and everything that we see manifest as light, magnetism, electricity, electrostatics, all energy, it comes from that pure potential state. Without this framework, we will never make any progress, and we'll continue to use the same AC generators that we've had since the early 1900s. So here's Nikola Tesla. This is what he's talking about. We just covered in the last slide. He's clearly alluding to the same principles, and he says, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 century than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Now, he's wrong about this actually, because way back in the day, they already knew this. We've actually just become stupid recently. Maybe 100, 200 years, we've really become stupid. Now, they prop up these figures as if they were ahead of their time, and they came up with these ideas, and they've been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years. But they were minorities at the time, and they were stupid, and now they're propped up as if they're smart, and now we're stupid. It's actually worked pretty magnificently, because if I tell someone that an atom doesn't exist, I immediately get ridiculed. It's almost worse than telling people that the earth is flat. Tell someone that the atom doesn't exist and electrons aren't real, they just like want to fight you. It's like, calm down, bro. There's no such thing as an atom. All right, so this is the more technical part. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but so again, ether has no Cartesian measure, location, or extension. Thus, it is not part of Cartesian space, like Cartesian coordinate systems, right? Like make a coordinate system, cross patterns. You want to, this location over here is like this extension over here. You want to quantify and map out the ether. You cannot do that. So therefore, they just ignore it and act like it doesn't exist. So it doesn't have any of those properties. Rather, dielectric capacitance is counterspatial, which is what we're talking about, ether, pure potential. So the idea of space, it's this area that's in this material realm. There's an inverse to that, just like there's a flip side to a coin, okay? And we'll just call it counter space. These words are so foreign to you because you have been brainwashed. And they were foreign to me as well. So you hear counter space, you're like, what is this guy talking about? It's just the part of the realm that you don't perceive with your eyes. You perceive it with other stuff, though, by the way. Like, they can't explain memories or dreams, or I can know if someone walks behind me on the stage, I'm going to know they're back there without turning around. I can think of people and know that I'm going to hear from them before I talk to them. I thought of someone I hadn't talked to in like 4 years, and they texted me a few hours later. It's not a coincidence. There is a realm that we don't materially perceive or experience that exists, and it is the pure potential state. All right, anyway. So basically the way that we're going to explain this is using this capacitor here. The tighter you wrap metal foils around, the more capacitance. Capacitance just simply means the ability to store electricity. Okay. Atomists claim that the metal surface carries the charge, yet it is the dielectric, or the insulators like glass, air, etc., the medium in between the wires that actually carry it between the metal foils that store the charge. The less space you have between, the more storage capacity you have in counter space. Now, I know that sounds like kind of complicated, but I got you, trust me. So capacitance is maximum units of dielectric induction a material can absorb before discharging. The metal is not where the electricity is, it is what contains the electricity. So I got a simple little analogy here. You see these beautiful cows here? It took me a while to find some that didn't have tags on them, I think. But anyway, the wires aren't the cows or the energy of the cows. It's what keeps the cows in. And or the sheep, if I move the fence in more and more and more, you have like less area of that energy to basically dissipate. That's what gives you more energy, right? So we were taught that the fence stores the energy, but the fence is just keeping the cows in, right? It makes the energy, it closes the amount of room it has for the energy. Basically, it creates more potential energy in counter space, the less actual space you have in the material world. I hope that makes sense, but basically what I'm trying to say is we've been told that basically you wrap it around the capacitor, and based on it, like, because this is used in all circuitry to do everything that we do, by the way. It's like, well, just because the metal carries it, now there's more metal, there's more wire there with it. No, it's just that you are creating less space in between the energy, and it's coming from the ether. I hope that made sense. Like I said, I didn't want to talk too much about this because we could do an hour on that. All right. Now here is Charles Produce Steinmetz. You've never heard of him. Arguably smarter than Tesla, though. Actually perfected his generator. He said, many textbooks speak of the electric charges on the conductor and the energy stored by them without considering that the dielectric energy is not on the surface of the conductor, but in the space outside of the conductor, just as also is the magnetic energy. This is him in electric charges or discharges, waves, and impulses. If anyone is interested in this and is kind of a nerd like me, definitely encourage you reading that book. That's basically him. So I'm going to try to explain this without being too technical and dry. So here you have a depiction of like basically power lines. So the dielectric that I'm talking about, it's interchangeable with the word electrostatics, so everyone can understand it. If I scoot my feet on the ground, I shock you, electrostatics. That's actually dielectric discharge. The dielectric is the blue, and the magnetic is the red. So the dielectric is the inverse or negation of force. It's convergent. And the magnetism is the force or the loss of the dielectric. It is divergent. So dielectric is voltage, and current is magnetism. Or magnetism is current. So I hope this makes sense, but basically everything is about this. Everything is about the dielectric and the magnetic are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. They try to define them as different things, and they say, oh, look, there's this many electrons over here, and oh, our math didn't work, virtual photons. But it actually sounds really complicated to you right now, but if you can, once it clicks in your mind, it'll make sense. I don't think that I'll be able to make sure it clicks for everyone right now, but it takes people a while to grasp this. I hope that the depiction here kind of makes sense to you. You can't have the blue without the red, or vice versa, simply what it means. And this is going to get into where we live. It's very important. But again, that can be a whole nother hour. All right, electricity is a circuit always comprised of the conjugate dielectric and magnetic. This is maybe the last really kind of technical term-filled slide. Electricity is simply the coherent hybrid modality of the dielectric and the magnetic. Electricity is magnetism and electrostatics or dielectricity together coherently. That's what it is. You can't have one without the other. The application of ether physics denotes magnetism as the loss of dielectric energy. Like I said, this is what's so hard about this. It's similar to when we found out about the Earth. You had to start to learn everything again, right? And it gets overwhelming, and you're like, oh, bruh, I'm out. It's everything. right? It's like everything in life you have like, about the earth you have to relearn, and it's the same thing with the ether, or electricity, or physics in general, because this is a different framework of physics. It's ether physics. And I know not everyone wants to devote their time, but I know there are some people in here that are really smart, and we definitely need to try to adopt this as a community so that the younger children growing up will have a proper framework. So the next little Nikola Tesla, doesn't get brainwashed with bombarding electrons and then can help us out as a society. I think this is very important. I'm pretty passionate about it. So magnetism is simply dielectric acceleration. Hey. Check you guys out. So the loss of, or magnetism is dielectric acceleration. So they say, magnetic attraction, but it's actually just dielectric acceleration. It's accelerating towards the counter space. Basically, if I move my hands around like this, it's going to create pressure mediation in between it. It's going to want to move, something put in between that is going to move towards the center where the pressure is mediating, where the least pressure is. That's what magnetic attraction is. It's moving towards the null pressure point. Anyway, it would take a while to fully explain all this, but magnetism is actually dielectric acceleration. The loss of potential or dielectricity results in the creation of dimensionality, which is where we apply dimensions to things, where we perceive them in the material world. It's the loss of that potential, that pure potential, and dielectricity. Of dimensionality, time, and motion, magnetism is force in motion. Space is grossly misdefined within modern atomic physics. In reality, space is simply a modality of the ether. Modality just being a fancy word for version of. Space is just a different version of the ether. Everything is, actually. Like literally everything. You can't name anything that's not. As we covered earlier, space does not permeate or travel through, or it should say ether does not permeate or travel through space. Space is just a version of the ether. The inverse or conjugate relationship just means, like the inverse reciprocated geometry. Conjugate relationship of dielectricity and counter space manifests as magnetism in space. Dielectricity is inertia and acceleration. Like I said, that one's just kind of really technical. Some people may kind of know what I'm saying, and hopefully I'll just put the presentation out. You can look at it. All right, now this is one big thing that I wanted to cover. So there is this. Oh, Austin, you're so crazy. There's no such thing as positive or negative charge. Yeah, no such thing. Doesn't exist. There are no positives floating around in the air, and there's no negatives in nature. What does that even mean? Just think about it. It doesn't make any sense. How can something be negative? How can you have something that's negative? That doesn't make any sense. It's a mathematical construct, okay? That's it. This is why we haven't made any progress in like a century. No one understands it. You're in high school or maybe middle school, and they're like, oh, the electron, negative charge. And you're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make any sense. We use it for purposes of convention and it's convenient or whatever, but this is why we're not making progress. People don't understand it. So there's no such thing as positive and negative charge, as in there is no negatives in nature. These are terms derived from atomistic confinement and the need to quantify. There is no such thing as positive or negative charge carrying particles. What is falsely called positive and negative charge is charging and discharging. Okay, so it's just an action. It's a process. Again, this is what I was trying to explain earlier. Instead of looking at it like it's some entity and we have to describe it, give it a name, and count it, it's a bunch of different processes. It's different processes within the ether. Okay, this is charging and discharging. So if you wanted to count it or describe it with math or try to quantify it, you'd have to call it something. So they called it positive and negative. You can ask any physicist that's worth their weight in anything, and they'll tell you that you can flip positive and negative and it doesn't change anything. It was arbitrary delineation. It was like, oh, we'll call that positive, we'll call that negative. You could flip it. They could have flipped it back then. They could change it right now in the textbooks, and it wouldn't matter. We would just call electrons positive, right? It doesn't mean anything. Now, it does mean something to how detrimental it is to interpreting what's happening. So magnetism is charging and discharging superimposed, meaning a magnetic field is both charging and discharging on top of each other. A simple way to understand this, though, we'll get to it in a second. Charging is the spatial toroidal divergent magnetic aspect, as you can see right here on the left. Hopefully you guys can see it. And then discharging is the counterspatial hyperbole convergent dielectric aspect. Anyway, if you can see the pictures, I know some of you guys may not be able to. It's basically like a donut. You draw through the inside of the donut, and then you have the outside motion of the donut as well. That's charging is basically the divergent aspect or the magnetic aspect. Divergent, and then the converging aspect of the we'll call it the geometry is dielectric. Okay, and this is what we call discharging or negative charge. This is why when you put them together, they move towards each other, right? Positives and negatives attract. Well, it's because they're conjugate geometry, so they fit into each other, if you will. So they just find, just like we know that, you couldn't have gas pressure next to a vacuum and fill space, right? Obviously, that's like psychopathic. It doesn't make any sense. High pressure goes to low pressure. Like heat goes to cold. It's the same thing with electricity. Right, so basically positive charge, well, we have a different geometry. We have excess charge, it's charging. It's in the process of charging. The negative charge is discharging. It's going to go to the system to seek equilibrium. So like, oh, there's more charge here. It's building charge. It has less charge here. It goes over here. Basically, the motions fit into each other. I hope that makes sense. But a simple way to understand what negative and positive charge actually is charging and discharging, and then think of a bottle of wine. A little early for that, though. Guys, chill out. We got the wine here. The wine is discharging, and the glass is charging. I couldn't think of a much simpler way to put that. That's all that it is. When they say something's positive and negative charge, something's building charge, something's losing its charge. It's literally that simple. And if you were taught that in second grade, you wouldn't be looking at me like I'm crazy right now, because it's that simple. And that's why one goes to the other to seek equilibrium. Just like if you have high pressure sitting next to a vacuum, it's the same thing. Again, it's atomism. It's so crazy. It's just like a house of cards. So it's atomism and materialism that has made us come up with these stupid names and these stupid denotations and mathematical fairy tales. And the reason ether physics was thrown out is because they had to throw it out to keep on the spinning ball fairy tale lie. Now, most of you guys have been freed from that lie, I would imagine. If not, you should just look into it. It's pretty stupid. Once free from that lie, it would be stupid to hold on to the confinements of that lie, right? Doesn't make any sense. That's why we're so devoted to atomism. Ether physics decimates heliocentrism. All right, moving on. Again, a lot of this stuff, I decided instead of hyper-focusing on one specific thing, I'm just going to kind of give you a taste of a bunch of stuff and hopefully make a bigger picture, but this could also be a whole other presentation. But what we call north poles are just basically clockwise motion, and what we call south poles are counterclockwise motion. You can actually prove this by looking at the fields change based on what pole you put the magnet next to, okay? Now, if we were taught that it's all about motion and geometry, and we were showed pictures and explained how it works, we would all understand it. We would certainly not be paying utility bills. All right, so I think this is I'm going to play Richard Feynman, hopefully the sound works, to kind of understand the lunacy of all this. I think I have a little bit of time. So it's like a 7-minute video, and it's Richard Feynman. If you ever heard of Richard Feynman, he is like a very famous physicist. He's like revered. And he was like the cool guy, he'd come out with his whiskey and his cigarette, and he'd be like, the cool guy that's smart, and the college kids loved him or whatever. He wasn't that smart, though, ironically. But he's an atomist as well, right, as is just about any physicist that you'll meet. And so they still can't explain magnetism or electricity or electrostatics in 2022. They don't know what it is. So, I must not be that crazy, right? At least I have an answer. They don't have an answer. And because this isn't my answer, I'm just trying to relay the message here. They say magnetism is something called virtual photons. Now, they don't actually exist, and no one knows what it is, and it's completely made up nonsense. And Richard Feynman will tell you that, virtual particles, their existence is questionable at best, and just a concept we made up to make the math work. So anyway, this is modern physics. They can't explain these things we use every day. And that's why you can't explain them, and you don't understand them, and that's why we're not making progress, not to be too reiterative, but here's Richard Feynman trying to explain what magnetism is. Of course, he's famous for his work in quantum physics. That everything's comprised of little particles, and it's like, what's gluons and buons, and just make up names, and then you're smart. This is him trying to, someone asked him what magnetism is, And this is one of the most famous physicists in the world trying to tell you what magnetism is. And this should be eye-opening to you as to how poorly defined, if you can even call it that, he responds to this question. Let's check it out.
If you get hold of two magnets and you push them, you can feel this pushing between them. Turn it around the other way and they slam together. Now, what is it, the feeling between those two magnets?
What do you mean, what's the feeling between the two magnets?
There's something there, isn't there? I mean, the sensation is that there's something there when you push these two magnets together.
Listen to my question. What is the meaning when you say that there's a feeling? Of course you feel it. Now, what do you want to know?
What I want to know is what's going on between these two bits of metal.
Magnets repel each other.
Well, then what does that mean, or why are they doing that, or how are they doing it?
You're asking.
I must say, I think that's a perfectly reasonable question.
Of course,
to
it's a
ask.
reason. It's an excellent question. Okay. But the problem that you're asking, you see, when you ask why something happens, how does a person answer why something happens? For example, Aunt Minnie is in a hospital. Why? Because she went out and she slipped on the ice and broke her hip. That satisfies it, people. It satisfies, but it wouldn't satisfy someone who came from another planet, knew nothing about things. First, you understand why, when you break your hip, do you go to the hospital? How do you get to the hospital when the hip is broken? Well, because her husband, seeing that her hip was broken, called the hospital up and sent somebody to get her. All that is understood by people. And when you explain a why, you have to be in some framework that you allow something to be true. Otherwise, you're perpetually asking why. Why did the husband call up the hospital? Because husband is interested in his wife's welfare. Not always. Some husbands aren't interested in their wife's welfare when they're drunk and they're angry. And so you begin to get a very interesting understanding of the world and all its complications. If you try to follow anything up, you go deeper and deeper in various directions. For example, you could go, why did she slip on the ice? Well, ice is slippery. Everybody knows that, no problem. But you ask, why is ice slippery? That's kind of curious. Ice is extremely slippery. It's very interesting. You say, how does it work? You could either say, I'm satisfied that you've answered me, ice is slippery, that explains it. Or you could go on and say, why is ice slippery? And you're involved with something, because there aren't many things as slippery as ice. It's very hard to get. Greasy, but that's sort of wet and slimy. But a solid that's so slippery, because it is in the case of ice that when you stand on it, they say, momentarily the pressure melts the ice a little bit, so you got a sort of instantaneous water surface on which you're slipping. Why on ice and not on other things? Because ice expands water expands when it freezes, so the pressure tries to undo the expansion and melts it. It's capable of melting it. But other substances crack when they're freezing, and when you push them, they're just satisfied to be solid. Why does water expand when it freezes and other substances don't expand when they freeze?
He obviously doesn't know the answer.
Turn them the other way, they attract. There's a very analogous force, electrical force, which is what ultimately is the deeper
He does this the whole
thing
time.
that we have to start. I can go a little more technical. Bands, I would be cheating you. Because they're not connected by rubber bands, I shouldn't be in trouble. You'd soon ask me about the nature.
Long story short, he doesn't know the answer. So, yeah, exactly. If you've ever debated a baller, it's very similar, right? When they don't know the answer, they're not going to say they don't know the answer. They'll die first. If anyone saw my debate with the physicist, it's very similar. So, he knows the answer is that he doesn't know. I've read his writings. He knows it very clearly. He knows that they can't explain it, and that particle physics, doesn't explain it, has a prediction it doesn't work, and magnetism eludes their grasp of materialism. So, I mean, that just shows kind of the character of that guy, in my opinion. He couldn't answer the question which is that he doesn't know. But we know, we can know, because we don't have to be devoted to atomism. We don't have to be devoted to the idea that there's this tiny little speck of dust that flies around in a vacuum. All right, so I'm going to kind of breeze through the rest of the thing. I've already been up here for a while. As some of you may know, I can really talk. All right, so atoms do not exist, meaning they are not things, as atomism and materialism claims. Everything is magnetodielectric dynamics in the process of pressure mediation or seeking equilibrium. The one natural law ever should be that all things seek equilibrium. That is the natural law. Everything's in the process of seeking equilibrium or pressure mediation. That's what everything is. There's a creation of energy that dissipates as space. This is the reason for the claim that atoms are 99.9% empty space. Whoa, how profound. Atoms are 99.9% empty space. No, they're not real, bro. They're not there. Okay. Which is obvious nonsense. This space is a process of what is being not done, not what something, or what is being done, not what something is. Magnetism is the fundamental force of nature, centrifugal dissipation of inertia. Like I said, there's no way. We have to be up for 5 hours to fully explain some of it. Thus, force in motion. Space is not a thing in and of itself. It is simply a privation of the ether, like a shadow of light. A privation, of course, cannot have physical properties. This is why Tesla famously said, "I hold that space cannot be curved for the simple reason that it cannot have physical properties." All right, now we're going to cover a couple misdefined terms. I'm gonna do it kind of quickly, so I love you guys. Sorry. Light is not a duality, as in a particle and a wave. That's nonsense. There is no such thing as an emission of light. You might shoot a laser and think you're emitting light. You're not. That doesn't exist. Light does not travel from point A to point B. I know it sounds crazy. You're like, I shoot a laser. I can measure distances. It doesn't travel. I promise. It's already there. All evidence shows us this. So intrinsically, it does not have a speed. What is incorrectly called light is in fact nothing more than illumination of the ether. Okay, this is important to try to grasp. We call it light, but actually it's nothing more than the ether becoming illuminated. Light is an ether perturbation or disturbance in the ether, the medium that is the ether. And there's a particular spectrum within the ether disturbance that is perceivable. We call this visible light. A property denoted as illumination. Light is not a wave either. As a wave is not what something is, rather is what something does. I can wave my hand, I can't hand you a wave, obviously, right? So I need the water to make the wave. Very simple concept. So light can't be a wave. This is like top tier physics, right? I mean, it's so stupid to me. All right, so light is not a wave, as a wave is not what something is, rather what something does. The wave-like properties of light is nothing more than a position and magnitude in time, not space. Not magnitude and direction in space. It has no direction. It doesn't travel. This would change the world if we knew this across the board. This fundamental misunderstanding is a requirement for the absurd claim that the Earth flies around the sun. Special relativity claims a constant speed of light traveling from point A to point B, obviously, to have that constant speed, because they're relativists, even moral relativists, you may find. If everything is relative, you have to have something for everything to be relative to. They chose light. That means light has to be constant, has to be absolute, so everything can be relative to light. That's to save the globe. Light is invisible. You're crazy. There's nowhere in the whole world that doesn't have light. Literally, the darkest part of the ocean, the darkest cave in the world, there's light there. You can't get rid of light. Light is everywhere. Of course, light is not just the visible spectrum of what we call light, but what light actually is invisible. And what we call light is nothing more than illumination. Illumination is what is visible. That's just a certain version of the background medium. That's what light actually is. It's already there. It's all around you. It is the ether. You know how they don't understand the double slit and all this other nonsense? It's because they don't understand light. Light is a dielectric longitudinal coaxial circuit with transverse electric and magnetic field modalities. Basically just wave-like properties of the electric field and the magnetic field. It's just longitudinal, meaning it goes in a longitudinal line, and it's not, I guess you could call it instant, but it's just already there. So, we could definitely talk forever about the light. All right, so next, the electron does not exist. Obviously, if the atom doesn't exist, Now you may want to. I encourage you go find pictures of atoms. They're not. They use motion sensory. They use contrasted images, and they're CGI rendered images, very similar to the ball Earth. The electron does not exist. There's no such thing as a negative charge carrying particle of a matter called the electron. If it's claimed to be like 100 million times smaller than the atom. So if you can't prove the atom, I can assure you're not proving the electron. It's just another convention built upon the materialistic need to quantify all things. J.J. Thomson, who discovered it, said it was nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction. Or simply, if you laid two lines of spaghetti over each other, and then I pointed to the where they cross, and I'm like, look, there's a little ball there. You'd be like, you're crazy, bro. You know, like, no, that's just spaghetti. It's where they cross. It's where two things cross. Same thing as a photon. Photons are where the dielectric and the magnetic cross. It's a process. It's an event. It's not an actual object. All right, so they claim that they see electrons in electron microscopes. If you can see here, actually it uses the electron gun, which is just a dielectric discharge, or electrostatics. You have your magnets, and it focuses it. Now, if electrons truly were were charge-carrying particles of matter, or autonomous corpuscles, meaning like corporeal or material, you could use them to probe any material, but this is not the case. Every non-ferrous material needs to be sputter-coated with a metallic surface that can break and reflect the incoming lines of induction. In the electron microscope, the lines of induction are called electron beams. In reality, the electron microscope is nothing more than an electrostatic reflectance imager. If anyone's ever heard me talk, I'm like, everything that exists is electrostatic. It is the key to all things, pretty much. You figure out electrostatics, you'll figure out where you live and the true nature about it pretty quickly. We'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to start going faster. I apologize. Already in 1900, Steinmetz called the notion of a charge-carrying electron prehistoric. He said, unfortunately, to a large extent, in dealing with dielectric fields, the prehistoric conception of the electrostatic charge, the electron, on the conductor still exists, and by its use destroys the analogy between the two components of the electric field, the magnetic and the dielectric. This makes the consideration of dielectric fields unnecessarily complicated, which is why I know it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. Some up here, but it's because we were deceived. Time and space, it is not nature which imposes them upon us. It is we who impose them upon nature because we find them convenient. Space and time are just concepts. They certainly aren't bending and warping, I can assure you. All right, so here is Tesla. Nature has stored up in the universe infinite energy. The eternal recipient and transmitter of this infinite energy is the ether. The recognition of the existence of ether and of the function it performs is one of the most important results of scientific research. And that was a long time ago. We still haven't done anything about it. All right, now here I'm going to show you, this is going to wrap it up here. My battery is also about to die. So this is the plane of inertia in a magnet. All magnets have this plane of inertia. Well, we live on a plane, and we live in a magnetic field, and that's why, because there is a plane of inertia through the middle of the magnetic field. You can prove it. I don't know where they would say the plane of inertia is on the ball. I've never had anyone ever answer that question. There isn't an answer. So electrostatic, all matter is intrinsically electrostatic, and it discharges in this form that you see right here. This is called dendritic Lichtenberg figures. This is all throughout all of nature. You have veins that look like this. We have geography that looks like this. You can see here we have different like water systems, of course lightning. Here is leaves, more geography. Your heart, lungs look like this. Your brains look like this. Trees look like this. Everything in nature looks like this because everything's electrostatic and everything is finding its equilibrium or discharging to find its equilibrium to get back to the ether in its pure potential state. I don't know when this laptop's going to die. Magnetic declination is the angle between magnetic north and true north. Declination is positive when this angle is east of true north and negative when it is west. Anyway, we have a quadrupole on the Earth. This debunks the globe. Magnetic declination debunks the globe if anyone knows about it. It doesn't work on the globe at all. Here's how you get this. You have two different magnets. You have to have, this requires polarities in opposition, and you get exactly what we see on the Earth. So yeah, the Earth is clearly flat. There's literally no other way physically to explain anything that we observe. But it's deeper than that. You actually can't explain magnetism without ether. So this was known about all the way back in Siberia, predating Sumer, Egypt, and India. This right here means realm where time is, and the realm where time and space is not, also known as the ether. They knew about this thousands of years ago, and with specificity. Here it is depicted by Da Vinci from a work from Luca Pacioli, don't know, in 1509. where it's the concept of space versus anti-space. And then here's the ancient Vedic picture I showed you earlier, and they called it the churning of the ocean of milk. Okay, and this is a decently accurate depiction. MacBook. I do have a charger. Is there a plug? We might can make it. So this is where you live, this little yellow line through the magnetic field. It's a toroid, and you see the flower of life here. That's why you see it in all of nature. All nature is electric and magnetic, and that's why you see this very pattern in all things. Here's another depiction of the magnetic field. I'm pretty much done. We're going to make it, I think. We have faith. So here's the summary. We are kind of getting slow. Everyone's seen this, all right? The time lapse of the star trails. Oh, check them out. You guys are legends. All right, another hour. All right, cool. We are pretty much at the end anyway. So everyone's seen the star trails, right? We've all seen it. They say the Earth is spinning, and that's why you see it. Obviously, that's stupid. But the question is, did it really just die anyway? It did. Anyway, I'll just it's hilarious. How did that happen? All right, I'll just wrap it up anyway. Basically, I was going to show you a picture of the star trails. We've all seen them. The question is, what's causing the motion of the star trails? It is the ether. It's a vortex. I was going to show you a picture of a vortex in water, so most of you guys have seen that anyway. That's what's drifting over top of the Earth. And then I was going to show you a ferrocell image of a supercell image of the magnet. If you look at that, you will see that that's where you live. So very simply, there's a vortex, like if you think of a tornado. It gets tighter at the bottom over top of the Earth, and this slightly drifts over top of the Earth. It's a vortex. This is the only form of motion that we actually can prove exists, basically, in the form of any type of perpetual energy exchange. So, simply put, there's a vortex of energy over top of a stationary plane Earth, and it's an all-encompassing energy field. And everything that you experience, certainly when it comes to energy, comes from this energy field. If you at least begin to understand this, it does have spiritual implications, but I'm not here to preach to you today. Maybe next time. Yeah. Just know that you're much more powerful than you think that you are. And this isn't like me just saying like some woo-woo thing. Scientifically speaking, there is powerful, pure potential all around you. And you can unlock the power. And you could basically learn to communicate and tap into this power. We need to figure out what's really going on and what the proper application of ether physics is. And this will unlock the future. So, in conclusion, there is a vortex of motion around you tied to the sky of the Earth. This is what we detect with any type of precession on the Earth, and moves everything around us in this intricate clock. And if we can tap into this ether field, we will be able to basically have the elite tumble for good. So that's the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin Whitsitt. Excellent.